Hi, I'm Balaji Chippada and welcome back to my channel. In continuation of our Python series for data science, in this video, let's learn about functions. Let's take a scenario in which you are writing a lengthy piece of code, and inside that, let's say there is some set of lines you need to repeat for some reason. Let's say there are 5 lines of code that you need to repeat 10 times. That is 50 lines of code that you are repeating. Okay, how would you do it? The first way is to brute force way, where you can type that 5 lines of code wherever you need and you can execute them in the flow. What are the disadvantages of doing this way? First thing is, the same set of lines of code you are repeating for multiple times. This makes your code lengthy and it is not organized enough, and maintaining the code will be little bit complex because you have to make changes everywhere if you want to make changes in those 5 lines of code, right? So what is the solution for this one? That is where functions comes into picture. So what do functions help is, we can define a function by giving some name, and you add that 5 lines of code inside that function, and once it is defined, you can call that function with a single line or function name, and you can execute those pieces of code again and again how many times you want in your lengthy code. So this makes your code modular enough, and this makes your code reusability because the function can be reused everywhere on anywhere, and you are organizing your code, and maintaining the code will also be very easy. Now let's stop about theory of functions and let's dive into the Google Colab notebook where we talk about all of these things in detail with code. Now let's start with understanding the syntax of a function. Okay, if you see, I can initialize or define a function by using the keyword called def. This is a keyword, and then I can give my function name. This is a customizable name, and you can give whatever you want. And it is open and closed with this parenthesis. Inside this, you need to give parameters, and we will understand about parameters in detail in the next part. And then once you are done with definition, you have to use colon, which indicates the end of function header, and then you initialize your indentations properly, and then you use your piece of code that you want to repeat or you want to execute for multiple times, and you can just return whatever the output you want. Return is an optional statement. Even if you don't write return, the function definition will work, and we will see with the live examples in this notebook itself. So let's move ahead. So let's say I have print hello world and Balaji is a great teacher. Okay, and I want to execute this in this cell. I can do like this. And if I want to execute the same thing in the next cell, I can just copy paste and execute it. And if I want to do it again, I can just repeat the process and I can get it. If you notice, all of these 3 cells are having the same output, hello world and Balaji is a great teacher, and we got this by executing these 2 statements in multiple cells, and these are exactly same. Now is there a better way of doing it? As we learned in the introduction, that is where functions will help you. So what I would do is, I would initialize a function by using def parameter or keyword, and then I am giving a name, custom name, which is print world, and I'm using open and closed parenthesis. If you observe properly here, I'm not giving any parameters inside. Let's understand this in a bit. And then I am passing my piece of code which is repeating multiple times, print hello world and print Balaji is a great teacher. Now let's try and execute this. It got executed without any issues. That means this is a valid function definition. I'm saying define a function called print world, and you start your parenthesis and close your parenthesis, and you give a colon, and inside that you pass whatever the code that you want to repeat multiple times for. And then whenever I want to execute these 2 lines of code that is present inside a function, what I can do is, I can call the function using the function name, which is this one, print world and parenthesis. If you see, this is the function name when we defined. Okay, now if I execute this statement, what it will do is, it will go to this function definition, and it will execute the piece of code that is present inside this function. So that is why I got hello world and Balaji is a great teacher as an output. I can do it in other cell as well, by using the same function call, which is print world, and I get the same output. If you observe here, we have defined our two print statements only once inside a function, and we are using the function name to print how many times we want. So by using this method, what we have done is we have reduced duplicating our code multiple times, and we have organized our code because anyone can see that function has two print statements and I can call them. Hopefully that is clear. That is the advantage of using functions. Now let's say I have two parameters a and b, and I'm passing the value as 10 and 5 to these two parameters. I'm doing a print of a plus b, and I got the output as 15. In the next cell, I want to do a sum of 20 plus 40. So how I'm doing it? Again, I'm assigning the value of 20 to a and value of 40 to p, and I'm saying print a plus b. If you see, print statement is same for both of these cells, but the values that you are passing towards these two parameters are changing, right? So can we do this kind of code execution inside functions? Yes, that is where parameters comes into picture. So what I say is, now define a function, and function name is add numbers. Okay, and you open your parenthesis and close your parenthesis. Inside this, I'm giving these two as parameters. If you remember the function definition, we talked about parameters, right? And then inside this function, I'm saying result equal to a plus b, print result. Okay, now what happens when I call this function add numbers, and I'm passing these two values, right? 10 and 5. So what this means is this 10 will be saved under a and this 5 will be saved under b. Okay, and inside this function the value of a will be 10 and value of b will be 5, and the result is 15, and you are saying print result. Hopefully that is clear for you. Now let me execute this, and then let me execute by giving the values as 20 and 40, and I got the output as 60. If you notice, I have declared a function with these two parameters a and b, and I have done the calculation result equal to a plus b and printing result, and I have done all of this only once. And whenever I want to add two numbers, I can just call this function and pass the values of a and b according to this format or order, and I can get the output. Even in this scenario, we have reduced so many lines of code by using a function definition. Here in this function, I am directly doing a print of result. Is there any other way that you can do it? Yes, that is where return comes into picture. What I'm saying is, instead of printing the result directly in the same function, I will say return the result. Result is a variable, right? This variable holds the sum of a plus b, the output you can get it. So what I'm saying is, when you call a function, okay, by passing these two parameters, it goes inside this function, it executes the result, and it is returning the result. So what happens when a result is being executed? Once it is calculated, this whole piece will be modified or edited by this result value, and then you are saving this result inside some result, and then you are doing a print of some result. Hopefully that is clear to you. So whenever a return is defined inside a function, whenever you call that function, the call will be overwritten by this output or return parameter. Now let's execute this, and I get the output as 15. Is there any other way that I can do? As I'm saying at 10 15, if I execute this, I can directly get 15 because this value or this function call with these two parameters is being modified by this value called return, because we are doing a return. Hopefully that is clear, and I can just do this. Now let's understand why we got the error. Type error, add numbers, one missing one position argument b. If you see, when I defined a function, I have two parameters a and b, and whenever I am calling that function, I am passing both of these parameters and the code is executing fine without any issues. Now when I say I add two numbers and I pass only one parameter, it is throwing an error because it is not able to understand what the other parameter is, and because the other parameter is not defined, it is not able to execute this. That is why it is throwing a type error. And how we will solve all of these issues, we will learn in the next video, which is function arguments and parameters. For now, let's give the two parameters, let's say 10 and 2, and we get the output. So far, we have given the parameters as integer values. Can we use some other data structures or data types inside the function parameters? Absolutely. Now let's consider this example. So what I'm saying is I defined a function called getSum, and this takes LST, which is of list format or data structure, as an input. Okay, so this LST holds a list data structure, and I want to sum all the values of the list. So how can I do it? I am iterating through all the values of the list for number inside list, and I declared or initialized a variable called sum equal to 0, and I am saying sum plus equal to num. So you add the first element to the sum, and second element to the sum, third element to the sum, likewise. And after all the additions are done, that means after the for loop got executed, you are returning the sum. So this is what this function does, returns all the sum of all the elements in a list. If you see, I added this inside triple quotes. This is called documentation. So why is this helpful? By reading this statement, I can get to know that this function returns sum of all the elements of a list. I don't need to go inside the code and understand what is happening, right? So this is for documentation purpose. Now let's execute this, and I'm calling this function getSum, and I'm passing a list of values 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and if I do print s, I will get the output as 10. If you see, I'm using a return statement inside a function. That is why I'm assigning a value to the function call. Hopefully that is clear. And then let's try it out with some other example. Get some 3, 10, 45 and 20, and we got the output as 78. Hopefully that is clear. In this example, we have seen that we can return some value out of a function. So what if I want to return multiple values inside a function? Can I do it? Absolutely. I have a variable called numbers inside a function definition, and I'm saying return minimum of numbers and maximum of numbers. So this function, whenever I call this function, it will return two outputs. One is minimum of these numbers, and the next is maximum of these numbers. So if I call this function, as it will return two outputs, I need to save it inside two parameters, right? Because I'm getting two outputs. Now I can just do like this. Sorry, I haven't defined this function, and once it is defined, I can execute this and I got the output. So what if I say a equal to get this and print a? Now let's execute this. Now observe this properly. Whenever I call this function, as the function is returning two values, and if I assign these two values to this function call, all of these outputs will be assigned to this corresponding minimum and maximum. But if I assign only one variable to this function call, which returns multiple values, these values will be returned as a tuple data structure, and we got the output as tuple of 1, 5. Hopefully that is clear. Now if I want to separate these values, I can just say a of 0. If you remember the tuple assignments and tuple indexing, this is what it is. And then I can say a of 1. And I can get the second value as well. Instead of doing all of this, you can directly use two different variables and assign them using the function call. Hopefully that is clear. Now let's understand the scope of the variables. Let's say I have a function definition multiply, and I have x and y as parameters. So what it will do is it will return me the multiplication of these two elements, and it will return the result. Okay, this is the function definition, and I can execute this. And remember, this result is a variable that is defined inside this function. Okay, and whenever I call this function using the parameters 2 and 3, I get the output. Now what does it do is, when you call multiply, it will go to this function call, and x will be assigned as value 2 and y will be assigned as value 3, and result will be 2 into 3, which is 6. Result is a variable which is having value 6, and you're returning the result. That means this whole thing is becoming the value result, right? And you are printing it. So can I directly print the result? Let's say print result, execute it, See, I'm getting an error. Even though the result is defined inside a function and the value is assigned to it, I am not able to access that parameter outside of this function. So what if I say print result inside it? Okay, let's execute this function and let me print this, and I get 2 times 6. The first time 6 is this print statement and second time is this result. So I am able to print the result inside this function, but I am not able to print the result outside of this function. That is what a scope of the variable is. This result is a variable that is defined inside this function, and the scope is limited to inside of this function itself. It is not accessible outside of this function. So this is also known as local scope of a variable. Hopefully that is clear. Now, are there any global variables of these functions? Yes. Let's say I declare a variable, global variable, and I say this is a global variable and it's a string type, and I define a function called test lifetime. Okay. And inside this, I defined a local variable which is defined inside the function, and it contains this is a local variable. And here I'm printing local variable and I'm printing global variable. Now let's execute this. And whenever you don't call this function, the piece of code inside this function will not be executed. And now let's call this function. Now understand the output. So when I call this function, it will be called to this point, and inside this local variable will be assigned, and it will print this local variable which is called, this is a local variable. And if you see this global variable, this is also getting printed without any issues, even though I haven't declared global variable inside function, because I have declared this here. Now I can access the variables that are outside of this function, and we call them as global variables. Hopefully that is clear to you. Now let's print global variable. This will be executed because we declared this outside of the function, and the scope of this variable is outside and inside the function as well. And when I say print local variable which is declared inside a function, this will throw error because it is outside of the scope of this variable. Name local variable is not defined. Hopefully that is clear to you. Difference between global variable and a local variable. Now doc strings. Doc strings are basically shortcuts for documentation of functions. So what it will do is, once you define a function, okay, and in the first line of code inside this function, you have to use these triple quotations, and you can write whatever you want inside it. Basically, you have to write what your function does technically, so that it will be easy for someone to understand by reading at the top of this function definition. So here, this is a function to add two numbers, and I'm saying return the sum of two numbers a and b, and I can execute this. And then if I want to return the value of this doc string, I can use the function called underscore underscore doc underscore underscore. It's a method. Okay, now let's take a real world example. In dictionaries, we have seen that we can access the values of a dictionary using a key. Let's say I have this dictionary, and I can say a of city, and if I execute this, I get the output as Bangalore, because I'm accessing the value using a key inside a dictionary. But can I access a key by using a value? No, it says key error because it is not valid in Python. Cannot access keys using values. Now how can I do it? So in this scenario, what I will do is I will create a function get key from value, and here I'm saying, let me execute this keys, print keys. And now let's execute this function. I will explain this function in detail. So what I'm doing is, let's execute this as well. So what I'm saying is, I have a dictionary A in which I have city Bangalore and age 30, and I'm calling this function by passing this dictionary like this, and I'm passing a value called Bangalore inside these two parameters. Hopefully that is clear. Now what happens is, this D will be your dictionary and this will be your value, and I'm filtering my keys in which my value is Bangalore. This is a list comprehension. I'm also printing the output keys as well, so don't worry. And if there are some keys present for this value, return the keys. If the keys are not present, return none value. Okay, now let's execute this and understand the output again. So here, this is the print keys. This output is city. That means I was successfully able to filter out my dictionary for this value Bangalore, and for that I'm extracting my keys and I got the output as city. And because something is present inside keys variable, it is returning keys of 0, the element inside this keys variable, which is city. So this is how you can get or return a key from a value in dictionary. Now that we understand the function definition, function parameters, return values, multiple return values, how you can use functions, now let's take a real life example and see how to handle. Let's say I am a librarian and I want to maintain a library. And what are the tasks that I have to do? I should be able to add new books to the library, and I should be able to remove books from the library. And whenever I want to see what are all the books available, I should be able to list all the books inside a library. So this is a task. So how can I make it easy for me to reuse the code multiple times by using functions? So as the initial point, I declared a variable called library and it is a list. Okay. And I created a function add book. Okay. And I'm saying it takes two parameters, the title and author. And whenever you call this function, what this function will do is it will append the book towards your library parameter. So library.append, I'm creating a dictionary in which keys are title and author, and the values are the values that we provide as a parameters. And then we are appending that dictionary inside your library list. Initially my library is empty and I'm just printing this has been added to the library. Now let's execute this. So now let's print library. So right now my library is empty and now I want to add some books to my library. I can just pass these variables. This is title and this is author. And if I call this function add book, it will append these two values by creating a dictionary inside our list, and it will append to the library variable. And if I do this, and now if I print library, I will have an element inside this list which is a dictionary of the book that I have added by using this function definition add book. Now what if I want to add one more book? I can execute this. What if I want to add one more book? I can just call this function add book and I can execute this. And what if I want to add one more book? I can call this function and execute this. Now I can execute, like I can add how many number of books that I want. And at the end, if I print the library, I have multiple elements present inside this, and I have duplicate as well. If you see, I have duplicate of element 3 and 4, but it's okay. I might have multiple duplicate books as well in my library. Now by using this one function add book, I was able to add multiple books without duplicating these two lines of code multiple times. So that is helpful, right? Now I want to list all of my books inside library. So what I say is I create one more function called list books, and inside this, if my library is not empty, then print books in the library and iterate through all the books in the library and print all the titles and author of this. If my library is empty, then it say currently the library is empty. And if I execute this and I call this function called list books, I was able to get all the books that are currently present inside my library by using only one function. And I can use this list books how many times I want, at how many, wherever I want. And now I want to remove a book from the library, and I say I want to remove it by using a title. So I created a global variable called library. So how you can define a variable as a global variable? So that is where an inbuilt function comes into picture. Global. Whenever you say global and you pass a variable, this will be treated as a global variable and you can access anywhere inside your code because it is a global variable and the scope is entire code. Okay, here I want to access my library variable, so I made it as a global, and inside this I'm filtering my books or the list in which my title is this given title, and because I'm filtering out that book from my library variable, it is removed from my library. Now let's execute this and I say remove the book 1984, and if I print list books, this will not be present inside my list books because we already removed using this function. Now what if I want to remove one more book? I can just say remove book and I can just say the Great Gatsby and execute this. And if I do list books, I can see that the book is also eliminated. So by using these three functions, list book, add book and remove book, I was able to reuse these wherever I want and whenever I want to add a multiple books and maintain a library. So this is a real-time scenario in which functions will save you a lot of time in coding as well. And whenever I want to change something inside this list books and all these things, I can just change it once here. I can say print, this is great. And whenever I define this function again by making changes here, this will be automatically treated to all the function calls. So if I want to modify a function definition, I can just modify in a single piece of code inside a function, and I can reuse it multiple times as well. So these are all the things that you need to learn in functions. That's it, guys. That is there everything to learn about basics of functions. I know this is a lengthy video, approximately 35-36 minutes, but I don't want to miss any of the core topics of functions, because functions are the basic building blocks and you come across these functions in day-to-day life many times, guys. So it is better to have a clear understanding of the functions. That is why I have given so many examples. I have explained it in detail. So I hope you learned something new in this video. And if you are at this point of the video and you are watching this, then a big round of applause to you, because you have dedicatedly spent 35 minutes of your time to learn about functions on my video. I hope I generated some insights for you. Hopefully we will meet in the next video, and peace out. Bye bye.